let's take a look at a couple of teams that Tennessee's going to have to overcome in order to do that. And that's Auburn and South Carolina. So, college football transfer portal winners and losers from the spring window. And what do you think of what Auburn and South Carolina did? I know we have a lot of South Carolina fans, and I've been eating crow for, I guess, right at 8 months. I thought Tennessee would hammer South Carolina. We all know what happened there. I thought Shane Beamer was in over his head. It doesn't look like that's the case after beating Clemson and playing Notre Dame well in the bowl game. So, and they're recruiting well and they're pretty hot. So, this South Carolina team that I've dismissed, I'll tell you, South Carolina fans, I did, and I was wrong. This South Carolina program is on the ups. I have questions if they can maintain it, but they're on the ups right now.
They absolutely are. South Carolina is ranked ahead of Tennessee still in recruiting. That's a big deal. I can't stress enough. That's a big deal. Clemson, I said back in January, Clemson is a program on the slide, and I still think that. But it doesn't matter if they're declining if South Carolina is emerging and they're still both solid, because that really ices out Tennessee recruiting. Guys, Tennessee needs to be able to poach South Carolina talent if they're going to be good. They can't win without doing that. And it's no coincidence. Tennessee wins the national title, and their last SEC title was 1998. Lou Holtz came to South Carolina in 1999. Guys, that's not a coincidence. That's not a coincidence at all. They first missed out on a bowl game, like the really end of the run that they had in the 90s and 2000s. The first year they missed out, Steve Spurrier took over in 2005. They missed out on a bowl game in 2005. Again, not a coincidence. The darkest period of Tennessee football history was during the best period of South Carolina football history, the 2010 to 2013 era, and then while Clemson was emerging as one of the best programs in football. These aren't mistakes. You want to talk about slide and decline? 2003, 2004 Peach Bowl, where Tennessee lost to Clemson. Dave, I'm sure you covered that game.
Yes.
You don't think that had a huge impact on Tennessee recruiting in South Carolina when that game happened?
It's funny you mention that. I don't think that single games usually have big impacts, but I thought that one did. I thought that kind of showed you the direction of both programs. And I thought that was a very significant loss. That's probably only one of 5 games in 15 years of covering recruiting that I would put as that made a big difference on the recruiting trail, because most kids don't really look at one game for the most part.
Yes, exactly. They don't. And this was one, though, where Tennessee's on thin ice they're hanging by a thread trying to keep South Carolina kids. And this was a big deal when they lost that. And the thing that was crazy was everybody knew Tennessee was the better team, but everybody, I'm sure you knew, Tennessee did not want to be in that game. They thought they had a chance at a BCS Bowl, and they were top 6 team, and they're stuck playing an unranked Clemson. And, just ever since then, it's been a big deal. So, yeah, South Carolina recruiting is a big deal. Tennessee's got to blow them out this year. They've got to prove that South Carolina was a fraud last year. That almost has to be as circled of a game as Alabama, Florida, and Georgia. Because if they can't destroy South Carolina and prove that last year was a complete fraud, if they let South Carolina hang around, they're in big, big, big trouble. It's like the serial killer in a slasher film, guys. You gotta like, you can't, in the slasher films, Dave, when they punch Michael Myers and he's knocked out and they think they're good and then he gets back up. No, you got to chop Michael Myers' head off. You got to chop South Carolina's head off.
I don't watch scary movies because they scare me. But my wife loves them. I've never understood the point of scary movies. I'll jump on the biggest roller coaster and have in the world, but scary movies, I'll take your word for it. So the other team that Tennessee needs to be concerned about may be a bit of a surprise. It was to me when Caleb suggested it. Portions of the program brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. No contacts. How about that? And also no glasses. I can see far. I can see near thanks to my LASIK surgery. They do cataract surgery as well. They've got the individual eye locations that they can take care of your eyes just with the annual checkups that we all need. So Auburn, a transfer portal winner. And yes, that's almost an understatement, as Auburn brings in a quarterback, Peyton Thorne of Michigan State, a wide receiver, Caleb Burton from Ohio State, offensive lineman Jaden Muskrat. I just like him because of his name, from Tulsa. Outside linebacker Jalen McLeod of Appalachian State. So, the kid out of Appy State, and I would think the Muskrat guys are guys that are going to have impacts because you've been able to see them at the college level. Do they get their next quarterback in Peyton Thorne? But I was a little bit surprised that you suggested Auburn as a hurdle for Tennessee. Why?
Auburn's a recruiting hurdle. Tennessee and Auburn recruit similar areas. And I want to go back in history on this one too. 1993, Terry Belton takes over Auburn. They go 11-0. You remember that year, I'm sure, Dave, right? When they went 11-0, couldn't play for it. Okay. What was underrated about that was that program was sliding because they had just gotten wrecked with probation. And because of that, recruiting suffered majorly. To quote a former president, recruiting suffered bigly. Okay. And
Bigly? Did a president use bigly?
Trump used to say that a lot. It was
that's not a word.
He would say it.
Nevertheless, we got a little politics coming up, and it's as far as I want to go into. So go ahead. Give me your bigly answer to why Auburn's so disconcerting.
Okay, so they suffered in recruiting. Don't pretend that didn't have a huge help on Tennessee being able to poach Georgia. Georgia being down, because Auburn is one of the schools that likes to poach Georgia. So Tennessee poached Georgia a lot in the 90s without competition from Auburn, and Georgia was obviously not competition because they were struggling. So that was a big deal. Again, Tennessee wins the SEC championship in 1998. I mean, that's their last SEC title. Yes, they beat Auburn, and I know Auburn played for the SEC title in 97. Anybody that knows college football knows that the SEC West during that time was like a minor league conference, wasn't it? I mean, it was a garbage division during that time period.
Yes. Auburn's scary for, I think, a couple of different reasons. Hugh Freeze, if he still has the recruiting ties that he once had, is going to be really, really good at Memphis, right? And there are 2 or 3 of those cats he's going to win, and Tennessee wants. So Memphis becomes very much more a competitive battlefield that it always has been, but enter Auburn, and because
particularly with Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss already still there getting Memphis kids. So
yeah, you have Lane at Ole Miss, and then as you know, because you're from Memphis, it's just not a one college town. I mean, it's almost like going to Atlanta, where you bump into somebody and you say, who do you root for? And you have no idea who they're going to say. But if you're in Knoxville, they 9 times out of 10 say Tennessee. If you're in Tuscaloosa, 9 times. But for those that haven't been to Memphis, it's just a wide open state. You don't know where those cats are going. So
even Atlanta and New Orleans, they still at least lean to Georgia and LSU. There's no lean in Memphis whatsoever. Every SEC team has a fan base in Memphis.
I don't think so really in Atlanta. I mean, just because because it's so cosmopolitan. And
yeah, that's true. You're right.
And I've co-hosted the sub-hosted the Chuck Oliver show, and he's a firm believer you hit on all schools. Now that's a syndicated show, but nevertheless, it's a weird deal. I mean, I bumped into people and they're like Michigan State. I bump into people like UCLA. It just, now if you get what's called the NAT line by recruiters, do you know what that means?
No.
Okay. So, when you're driving south in the summer and your windshield's fine, and then suddenly you hit the gnats start hitting your windshield.
Oh, yeah.
So that's just about probably 50 miles south of Atlanta. You hit the gnat line. At that point, everybody is Georgia fans. You will not find a fan anywhere else below the gnat line. And it's really tough to get guys out of there. As a matter of fact, I bumped into a guy at the gym this morning from Warner Robins, and it made me think of Jason Respert, to go way back in time, center for the University of Tennessee. You remember him?
Jason Respert. Yep.
To
go a little more recent, I think Marquez Callaway's from Warner Robins too.
Yeah. So I below the gnat line, I'm with you. On the outside of the perimeter of Atlanta, I'm with you, but that's pretty cosmopolitan. You and I would both agree, despite the impact that Auburn and South Carolina could have on Tennessee's recruiting, we would both agree that Georgia is the behemoth they have to top in recruiting, right?
That is the elephant in the room, and that's the difference between now. If there's one difference between now and the 90s, it's Georgia. But it doesn't help that Auburn and South Carolina are making moves too.
Yeah, you can finish second to Alabama in recruiting, and if you do that for 3 straight years and you're ahead of Georgia, you're going to win a national title.
Exactly. Exactly.
Bingo, bango. There's just
And
absolute.
by the way, this is a threat to Alabama too long term. And when Nick Saban retires, it's hard. There's so much competition in this area. Everybody's going for the Georgia kids. Put it that way. That is the state. You got 6 schools all fighting for Georgia kids. In South Carolina, secondary, obviously. And guys, it's difficult for Tennessee.